Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be showing you how I make maps for Foundation, and along the way we'll be learning some tools that may or may not be familiar to you, but they're also useful in other contexts besides just making maps. So I'm going to first start with foundation.mod.io. This is where all the mods and maps of Foundation are kept, and I suppose it's important to understand that a map in Foundation is simply a mod. So mods and maps are interchangeable to some degree. A map is just a special kind of mod that sets up the starting conditions of the game. But you can also add other things to the map that are just like mods, special features or items of interest, and they act just like any other mod within Foundation. So I suppose there's two broad categories of maps today, besides the vanilla maps which come with the game. But in terms of modded maps, you have maps which are essentially like vanilla maps, so they don't have any extra features with them, which is most maps. And then you have some maps which have some special features. So I'll give an example. The last map that I made is Extremadura, which is based on some terrain from Spain. And this map has no unusual features, so it uses exactly the same types of things that you would see in a vanilla map. It has the normal trees, the normal stone, berry deposits, and the mineral deposits. In contrast, a map like Elsmere, which is mostly normal, but with the exception that it has unusual stone and mineral deposits. So for example, you can see in here, the stone, instead of being infinite deposits, is scattered across the landscape, and it's not infinite. And the minerals are not the huge mineral deposits that you see in vanilla games, but they are rather kind of like the stones. They're scattered across the landscape. So that's a special kind of map that has special features which require basically mod code to enable those features. But today I'm going to be focusing on just how do you create a vanilla style map with all the same kinds of features that you would expect from a vanilla map. First step to creating a good map is a height map. So in case you're not familiar, height maps are simply black and white maps, which the lighter the color of the map, the higher the elevation. So perfect black means the lowest elevation, and perfect white means the highest elevation. And I've just gone onto Google to look for height maps, and I found this one, Grand Canyon height map, which I could also find in different ways. I'll show you other ways of finding height maps, but just in terms of a quick way, you can look these up online, find a height map that you're interested in, and get a copy of it. So I've gone ahead and right-click copy that image. And for this height map, I'm going to be using a tool called paint.net. It's a free raster image editor. You can download it on the internet. There's no cost to it at all. It's a tool that's been around for a long time. It has a pretty standard type of user interface. I've learned this over a couple of years, but really it wasn't hard to learn the basics. So I'm going to hit Control N to start a new image, and I'm going to paste the image that I copied from the internet. And by default, when I create a new image canvas, it will default to the size of any image that is currently in the clipboard. In Foundation, map mods are a certain size. So they're 1024 pixels by 1024 pixels. So the first thing that I'll do is I'm going to resize this image. So I'm going to take this little tool up here, which is rectangle select, and I'm going to grab part of the image. And if you look at the bottom kind of right-hand side of my screen, you'll see that it shows you the size of the image that I've selected. So I'm going to try to select something that's roughly a square. Maybe I'll move it over just a little bit to get the tail edge of that river. I kind of like this prominence here, so maybe I'll take this side. That's mostly square, so I'm going to Control C to copy, Control N to create a new one. I'll paste that and go up to Image, Resize, 1024 by 1024. And I want to make sure that Maintain Aspect Ratio is turned off, so that if the image that I copied isn't exactly square, I can make it square. So I do that, and now I have an image to start with. So I can go ahead and save that image and use it in the next step of my process. For the next part of this process, I'm going to be using a tool which was created by a map creator. This tool is a standalone tool, but it works specifically for Foundation. So if you go to foundation.mod.io and search for Unofficial Foundation Map Editor, if you download this 50 megabyte download, you'll get a standalone application which you can use then to create maps in Foundation. So I've already downloaded UFME, and I'm going to open that now and show you how to import the height map. When you open UFME, you'll begin with sort of a blank map, and what you need to do is go to File, New Workspace. And I'm not sure what to call my new map so far, but we'll call it Canyons. That creates a directory, and we need to fill out some information. So the map name is Canyons, Bachushki's Maps, and we'll go map_canyon as the ID of the map, which needs to be unique, I think, compared to any other map. The author is Bachushki. Version. So in the version, because of something that the creator of this tool did, it's best to start with 1.1.0. I'll show you why later, but just believe me that that's the best version to start with. And for description of map, we can change that later once we actually have a map that we're happy with. So I'll click done. So that's created a folder on my drive in which all of the files for this map will be stored. The next thing that I need to do is to import a height map. So I've already got that height map in my downloads. So I'm going to go ahead and grab it. You'll see it show up here in the preview. And in order to make it push into the actual editor, you need to click this button up here, which is to build the height map from the baseline map. It takes just a second to do that. And now you'll see the map here. Now what's basically happened is that the tool has taken this height map and it's smoothed it. So you'll see that it's blurrier than it was before. And this is important because Foundation itself does better when the height map is a bit smoothed. It doesn't do well with sharp lines and pixelated height maps. And there's some settings in here which you can use to adjust the amount of smoothing that happens to the map. So you'll see a pre-filter and a post-filter. So if I change this to 5 and 3 and click this button again, you should see that this map becomes a little less blurry than it was before. So that's how you adjust the blur settings. It basically blurs the map to make it work better the way that Foundation interprets height maps. The next step is to create an image which represents the grass within Foundation. So if you've played Foundation, you know the grass is an important part of the game. It's how you can tell that the villagers are making paths, and it sort of covers the entire map. Foundation allows you basically to set grass settings between no grass, so like a beach or sandy area, and full grass, which would be meadow, that kind of thing, field. You can also have in-between shades, which allow you to have sort of grass which is not very high, interspersed with dirt. And sometimes I use that effect to make what I think of as more dry maps, where the grass is not as lush and green. For the moment, though, we're going to build material mask, so clicking this button here, and that will create a default grass setting. So red is where the grass is full, green is where there's no grass. And I'm going to leave this alone for now. This basically would mean that I'd have water along here, although that is a different setting in here, but this shows you that you'd have some water coming in here on the river. If I wanted to lower the elevation of the grass or raise the elevation of the grass, I can do that here. So level 200. So if I do 250 and build a material mask, it should change the level of the grass so that now the grass is higher in elevation, which reveals more space for places where I can have water. I'm going to go ahead and go to 300 and see how that looks, because I'd like to see that this river system is completely devoid of grass. Next, I'm going to create the 3 major resources of the game, so berries, rock, fish. So building a berries map is very straightforward using this tool. You set a minimum elevation and a maximum elevation, and you also tell it how steep the land can be to allow berries to spawn. Now my map should be quite steep because I have this large mountain here or cliff, and then I have a few cliffs along here along the fall line. I'll probably leave that setting alone. I know that my grass starts at elevation 325, so I'm going to say the berries should start at 340 and should go no higher than 500. Let's just start there. We'll build a berries map. And the way resource allocation works in this game is that the image which is used to generate the resources is black, and anywhere where it's white, that's where the resource is generated. So you can see that in this map, there would only be a few berries right along here where it satisfied my conditions, and one down here, which is not nearly enough. We need a lot more than that. So let's start and say we'll do up to 1,000. Perhaps the map has a higher elevation than I'm thinking. So it did make a difference. So now I'm getting lots of berries on both sides of the map. And if we go to steepness of 30, this should allow me to put more berries in more steep locations, which it does. So now I'm getting some berries out here on this peninsula, which is great. I'm happy with the berry distribution. Next, I'll do my rocks. It's similar, so I'm going to make it a little steeper, 35, minimum of 345 elevation, and a maximum of 1,000. And the key thing in this game is you need, in a single tile on the game, you need to have berries and stone and trees. So we want to have pretty broad distribution of both resources to ensure that there's lots of starting points on the map. Next we have fish. So we know that our water or our grass elevation is around 325. So I'm going to say the max elevation for fish should be 300. And I only have a few areas of water along the edge of the map. And I have, of course, the river itself. This looks okay as a starting point. We'll obviously test this and make sure that it works, but for now, I think I'm happy. So those are the three main resources. And then we have the trees themselves, which are kind of a different way of doing it. So I'm going to click up here on the tree map, and it's going to create a density map. And again, we have similar settings where we set the minimum elevation of trees. So we'll do 335. And max for this band of trees, we'll do a max of 750. Density of 80%. I'm going to overlay with Perlin noise so that we get sort of a randomized distribution of trees. And I'm going to add 3 different tree types. So I've got oak, I'll click add here, change this to sycamore, and add one more time. And the third tree will be poplar. So there's 4 vanilla trees, oak, sycamore, poplar, and pine. So in my lower elevations, I'm going to go ahead and do the 3 deciduous trees. And then I'm going to create another tree map, map number 2, with a minimum elevation of 600 and a maximum of 1,000. And here I'm going to do pine trees. So in my lower elevations, I have deciduous, and in my higher elevations, I have pine. So these haven't been built yet, so I have to click build. So now I've got my distribution of deciduous and build for my pine trees. We're obviously going to be able to adjust all of this later, but these are good starting points for now. The next thing I need to do is set up villager entry points. So in the game, villagers appear on the edges of maps, and I need to make spaces for them to do that. So I click this button here to add a village path. Now the problem with this village path is that it may start in the water. You can see that this point on the map may be in where I've had water. So I'm going to go ahead and move this so I can click on a point here. I'll just move it inland slightly to ensure that it does not start in the water. I'll click this one here, good, a little bit this way. And you want to have multiple village paths. Not only are they used for villagers arriving, but also they're used for traders and envoys. So usually I create quite a few of these right across the map. The last bit that I need to do is adding mineral deposits, but I have a different way of doing that. If you want to, you can use this editor to add mineral deposits. So you click this button here and you can drag the mineral deposit where you want. And that works pretty well. I have another method for doing this, which I'll show you. For now, we have everything that we need to start testing the map in Foundation. So what we need to do first is to save the workspace. And we're going to click this button here, which is the cook button. So it cooks the map, meaning that it exports all of the files required for Foundation to actually use this map as a mod. I've already done all these things. So basically it's saying you don't need to do these again, generate these files. So I cook selected. And here are the files that were cooked by the UFME tool. Before we go any further, I need to explain how maps and mods are inserted into the Foundation game. So on your computer, you're going to have a mod folder, like this one, where Foundation keeps the list of maps and mods. On my computer, this is in my Documents folder under Polymorph Games, Foundation, and Mods. And by the way, this is also in the Foundation folder where saved games are kept. But we're going to be in the Mods folder, and you'll see that each mod has a number. This number corresponds to the foundation.mod.io mod number. For example, this mod, the UFME tool, is mod ID 393534. And if I go back to mods here, and perhaps go to a mod that I've created, the fire mod is 1593800. In this folder then I can find that mod, and by the number I can tell which mod it is. So it's important to know that mod number from foundation.mod.io. So to create a map mod, you can use the cooked files from UFME. The way you do this is you go up one level from cooked. So go here. So copy the cooked folder, go to your mods folder, paste, rename it. So I have a naming convention, so I'll say map canyons map. I have the version number. Doesn't matter what the folder name is, to be honest. It's just whatever makes sense to you. And now I have my map mod itself. To finish, you need to go into mod.json, and you'll see here that it has some of the information that I entered on UFME. Now UFME was created some time ago, so there's some additional fields that we need to enter here, but we can do that later. Also, if you go into mod.lua, and by the way, I'm using Visual Studio Code, which is a free program, which you can use to edit Lua files. So I find it quite useful because it has some plugins which allow you to check the syntax of your files for errors. You can use any code editor that you prefer. You could even use a text editor. So in the mod.lua file, you can see that it's loading different map files. So the height map, the material mask, which is the grass, the berries, the rocks, fish, and the 2 tree maps that we created. And it's creating some code. So this is the way that Foundation can understand the parameters that you want for your map. So for example, the ID of this map is map_canyons. It shows the name. So these have been registered as assets. So the grass file, the PNG file, has been registered as material mask. So you can see that's being referred to here. These 2 settings here, min height and max height, are really important. And we're going to be adjusting these as soon as we see what the map looks like in Foundation. We have the villager entrances, which have entrance and an exit. These are coordinates, so an X, Y, and Z coordinate. We have the density spawn list, which is the trees that we have. So the oak trees, the sycamores, and the poplars, with some different settings around those. And we have the second tree map, which is the pine trees. Then we have our berries, we have our rocks, and we have our fish. And that's it. That's all a simple map is. It's setting up these parameters so that they can be loaded into Foundation. If you're curious to know more about how maps are set up and what this code means, you can look at the Foundation API wiki. This is at polymorph.games/foundation/modding. And in here, if you go to the scripting API and scroll down the asset classes, you'll see that there is an asset class called custom map. And custom map will explain all of the parameters that we just saw in the code. So if you wanted to build a map from scratch, or if you were trying to understand what exactly that code meant, you can use this page to understand it better. Within the file that was created when I clicked the cook button, you'll see that there's a maps folder. This folder has the images that we saw in the tool, and these images can be edited. So once UFME creates these, you can edit them in paint.net or in any other raster image editing tool. For example, if I click on fish, I can see how the fish are set up, and I could myself place fish manually on this map using paint.net, which I often do when I'm creating more complicated maps or when I want to have fine control over where things are located. I'm loading up Foundation now, and what you'll notice as you're loading the game with a new mod or new map, in the mod folder itself, a new file has been created by Foundation called generated IDs. This file is very important. It has a list of all the IDs used by this mod. In this case, it's just the mod ID itself. You need to make sure that you don't delete this file, because everybody who uses your mod when it's uploaded to foundation.mod.io will need to have this file be the same as it is on your computer so that it works for saved games. So make sure that you don't touch or delete generated IDs unless you know what you're doing. Because the UFME tool was created quite some time ago, it's missing some features which have been added to Foundation since then. One of those features is a change to the JSON file which defines some parts of the map. So on the right-hand side, I have a map that I've already released, and you'll see that it has some different fields. We need to reflect those fields in the file that was created by UFME. So number one, the name of the map is repeated. So here, name should be canyons. And there's a description and a preview image. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and you could do the same thing. You could download a map from mod.io and copy these fields just as a starting point. To be completed. Preview image is an image that's shown within Foundation to preview what the map looks like. So I'm going to save this JSON file. I'm going to go to Extremadura map, the one that's been released already, which I have downloaded. And I'm going to copy the metadata file, put it into my new map. Now it has a preview image, which is not the image of this map that I'm creating now, but I'll replace that later. It's just so that we have something to start with. Here I am in Foundation. I'm going to click New Game, and at the bottom of the list of maps, I should see the new map that I've created. Canyons, it has the wrong image as we discussed, and it has no description, but we'll fix that later. Click Confirm. Disable any other mods that might be preloaded from a previous start that you gave Foundation. So I'm just loading this one mod, which is Canyons. Here I am in the first preview of my map mod. So I'm looking around, and what I'm going to do this first pass is I'm going to validate, number one, that the water is where I wanted it to be, and number two, that I'm happy with the smoothness of the terrain. So we could look at trees and rocks and all that stuff, but let's just ignore that for now and just look at the smoothness of the terrain and the level of the water, and also whether I even like this map. So I was looking for a map where I had a steep canyon with a river running through it, and I do have that canyon, and I have a little bit of water in it, but it's not as much water as I'd hoped for, and the map is actually a bit steeper perhaps than I was expecting. So I'm going to make a few adjustments in my map file. Here I am in mod.lua in my map file, and I'm going to be adjusting the min height and max height. So basically this determines where the water level will be in Foundation. At the moment, in Foundation, there's only a single water level available for modded maps. You can't have a lake that's higher than the ocean, for example. You can't have rivers that run downhill. You simply get a single elevation, and that's where the water goes. So I'm going to adjust this to raise the water level up. If the distance between the top and the bottom of the map is 100, I'm going to keep that constant and change min height to 0, put max height to 100. Save that file. And what I have to do then is I go out of the map, so quit game menu, start a new game with the same map. Now I should see a new water level. So you can see that it appears that I have lowered the water level rather than raised it. I've done the opposite of what I wanted to do. So in here, if you increase the numbers, which I did, you will lower the water level. So it's sort of the opposite. An increased height in here will lower the water, and decreased height will raise the water. So I'm going to go down 20 meters here. I'm going to reduce 20 meters from the maximum. So now I can see that the water level has raised considerably. So now my canyon is filling with water. I also have water in the little shore or lake over here, which I was expecting to see. Probably still not high enough, still not as high as I had hoped, and it's definitely not filling the entire river basin. So I'm going to go ahead and add 15 meters this time, dropping this by 15 and dropping this by 15. Now I've got a lot more water, more of the canyon that I was expecting. I have my shoreline over here. You can see that the water level is actually quite a bit higher than the level where I specified the grass should end. But let's just take a look and see if we like this. Is this what we were expecting? I do like the fact that it doesn't completely cut off this landmass from the other landmass, so there's still a place for the villagers to go through, but that most of the map would require that bridges be built across this chasm, this canyon. And to be honest, it makes more sense that there would not be sand along these edges, because these are so steep that definitely sand probably would form in the spaces. If you look over here, you can see that my sand is ending quite a bit below the level of the water. But I'm going to leave it as is. I don't not like this map. I like it all right. I like the high area here, although it's not centered in the map, and so it's probably not as useful. Most of the more buildable places in the map are covered in trees, so we may want to reduce the tree cover to some degree. We've got this area which is quite complicated. I was thinking this would be a good site for a castle or a town. It's very steep and sort of very difficult to build anything along the shore. One thing that I'm thinking is that perhaps this map is a little bit at the wrong scale. So an example would be this hill here. You know, that looks nice, but from a build perspective, it's impossible to use that because it's just too small. So it might make more sense for us to reduce the scale of our map, still have the canyon, but maybe basically create a map which is a smaller subset of this terrain so that we can use more space on the map. To do that, I'm going to go back to paint.net and my original height map file. I'm going to select a subset of that height map. So just focusing perhaps on this area, which I thought was quite interesting, I'm going to take a corner of the map, get a roughly square piece of it, perhaps going a little bit further up to avoid the boring bits at the bottom. Copy, new, paste, resize, 1024 by 1024. Save, and I'll just overwrite the height map that I had before. In UFME, I'm going to re-import the height map. Click the button, build it, redo my material mask, which is the grass. I'm going to leave the berries and stone and everything else. We'll deal with those later. Look. So all I've really done here is I've changed the height map, so I don't need to copy all of this code, especially since I've started to change some of that code. I'm only going to copy the height map material mask. I'm going to take those, I'm going to put them in the actual mod here, place those files. You can see that the trees are kind of in the wrong places now. They're on the cliff sides and then sort of close to the water. We'll fix that later, but I do have more usable space. I'm still not entirely happy with this peninsula. It's just too small to use most of that. This bit here is usable, and I like the canyon. It looks nice. And I like these arms. But again, I still think that the scale is just, it's the wrong scale. So let's see if we can improve this by reducing the size of the map. So I'm going to take a subset of the map again, copy, create a new one, resize, save, overwrite the map in UFME, import the height map, click the build button once it arrives, push it over there, create a new material mask, and cook. So you can see that I'm getting basically a completely different map. I no longer have the large highland area, I just have the peninsula. The peninsula itself is a lot larger, so there's more space to actually build something on that peninsula. It's very steep. I may adjust the steepness of the map. You can see that there's very little usable space along here because of the steepness of the map, and I have this very broken terrain here, which I like. I like to work on difficult maps, and it would be fun to build bridges across all of these. So the first thing that I'm going to do to adjust this, I'm mostly happy now with this. This little bit here, of course, is totally unusable. But you can imagine maybe a tower or something on the edge of that. I'm going to update the steepness of the map by shrinking the difference between the min and the max height. I'm going to take this and go down to 25. I'm going to reduce this by 10. So I've increased this one by 10 and reduced this by 10. That's going to result in a flatter map where the difference between the maximum and the minimum heights is less. So you can see now a lot of the steepness has been eliminated. The water is a little bit higher, which I can adjust later. There's still a lot of steep cliffs, but there's more access points. That little peninsula we were looking at earlier, I think, is this, and it's been really reduced down. You can see that the water is probably too high, and the steepness of the land underneath the water is quite dramatic. But that the land itself is probably more accessible. We want to make sure that villagers can get from a cliffside down to the bottom. So, for example, this here can serve as a ramp for them to get from one place to another. On the other side of the map, this highland area here is now accessible because they can walk from here down this ramp to the area near the shore. And that's important for fishing and other reasons. A lot of this map is unusable for building, which many players would find frustrating. I actually like the challenge. I think I'll go ahead and reduce it further. Perhaps by lowering this number, I can get the water to, or sorry, increasing this number and get the water to reduce. I'm going to remove some elevation. So now the fjord or the canyon is not quite as deep and the mountains are less steep. Still lots of variation in terrain. Just evaluating it again from a build perspective, this area here shows some promise as a place to build something, this entire part of the map. You can imagine then that the player would need to build some bridges or at least get through this little ravine. Build here. This is a nice peninsula for a small castle. These peninsulas are promising as castle points, and this here as well. From a farming perspective, the best farmland would be along here perhaps, and in this area where if these trees were to be cleared, there would be not flat land, but reasonably flat land for farming. As far as prominences go, there aren't a lot of high hills. There's this one here, which is not huge. A little bit of a prominence there, but it's more of a flat map with the canyon being the main feature of interest. And by flat, I don't mean flat, just lacking mountains. I'm going to readjust the mineral distribution and resource distribution to map the new map that we created. So I'm going to rebuild the berries, rocks, fish, and the trees. I'm going to cook those. Don't need to change anything again in the code. All I need to do is copy maps that I've created, writing the maps in the mod. So now you can see that my sand is appearing now. So I'm getting a little bit of a beach effect, which may or may not be what I want. The lowland trees are really only near the shore, so here's some deciduous trees, a bit up here, but then anything further up high is all pine trees. Which is alright, it sort of matches the look of this map, which would be maybe somewhere in Nova Scotia or somewhere sort of in a northerly latitude. Pretty cold, pretty windswept, very rocky. In order to make the starting positions of berries, rocks, and trees work better, and to create more starting positions, what I often do is I place the berries and stone manually using paint.net. So I'll show you how to do that. First, I'm going to copy the height map that I have in my mod. Go to paint.net, Control N to create a new page which will match the size of the image in the clipboard. And I'm going to rename this layer height map. I'm going to add a layer using this button here. Call this one berries. Add another layer. One will be stone. So in my berries one, I'm going to go and copy the existing berries map and paste that into berries. I'll do the same for stone. Now in order to see all the layers together, I'm going to click this button here, Properties of Layers, and change the transparency of each layer so that I can see both. And I'm going to have the opacity of one layer different than the other so that one of the dots shows up lighter than the other. So for example, stone, if I delete that, you can see that stone is the lighter dot of the two. And you can see that I've manually placed these so that they're close together so that I get more starting positions. And how to do this, if I'm on the stone layer, so I click on stone, get a little selection here, I select one of my dots, Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and grab this little thing here. And then I can move the dot around and create another stone deposit. And I just Control C, Control V each time that I'm adding a new one. In this way, I can control exactly where my dots appear. Then I go to berries and I do the same thing. And I place the berries close to the stone, and if they happen to be in the same hex, then I will get a starting position if there are also enough trees in that starting position. So this is a way that you can increase the probability that you will get more starting positions. Now you could also check the tree map, so I could go here, get another layer, tree 1 and tree 2. Now I've renamed this mod to Eidfjord Maps, and I just click on berries and save. And I'll do the same for stone. Save. Right. Next, I'll show you how I place mineral nodes in the game, the quarry spots for mining metals or ores. Create a new game with this map, so the Eidfjord map. And I'm going, instead of just adding the Eidfjord mod, I'm going to also add a mod called Aladdin's Map, which I've already installed, and click Start Game. Aladdin's Lamp gives you some cheat utilities that some players use to make the game easier, but I've also included a feature in here which will help you build custom maps much faster. Using the UFME tool, you can place mineral nodes, but there are some issues with doing that because you often can't predict the correct orientation of the node, and it's also a little bit challenging to get the height of the node correct. So I'll just show you how this works. I'm going to create a starting position here, and I'm going to place my village center, doesn't matter where. I'm going to place the Aladdin's lamp and give myself infinite gold, this chest here. Click build. So now I have infinite gold, and I can buy any territory that I want. So I click and buy a bunch of territory, and I buy the territory where I want to place my mineral nodes. Next, I use Aladdin's lamp again, place another lamp, and I've got the choice to put down mineral nodes. It doesn't matter which one you use, so just use the first one. And you'll see that in this mod, it has two arrows which show the rough orientation of the final mine. So you want to make sure that those arrows will be in a place that the builders and the workers can access. So I like to place my mineral nodes kind of up against a hill. So just find a little hill here, make sure the arrows are free, and place all of your mineral nodes at once. So put them all down here. So obviously when you build a custom map, you want to have 8 or 9 different mineral nodes at least. That will ensure that the player gets at least one of every type of material, be it marble or iron or whatever. So once you're happy with the placement of all the mineral nodes across the map, you continue to buy territory and place them wherever you like. Click build. And Aladdin's lamp will put the mineral node into the hillside as you've directed it. The next step is in your Foundation folder on your disk drive within Documents, Polymorph Games Foundation. There is a file called foundation.log, and you need to open that file. And this is the way that Foundation logs different things that happen during the game, as well as errors that can occur. I've made, within the Aladdin's Lamp mod, feature which logs the location and the orientation of the mineral nodes that you've placed. Now I can see that I don't have that. I've scrolled down to the bottom of my log, and the log has not yet updated with that information. So I go back to the game, and I hit Control-Shift-R, which will reload the game. So this is a useful feature when you're developing and testing mods. Rather than having to go out of the game and go back in again, Control-Shift-R will just reload the game. And what it does is it triggers this log to update. So now I can see that I have another group of log entries, and that the Aladdin's Lamp mod has logged the position and orientation of the mineral nodes that I've just placed. And I can take these one at a time. So this is the position of the first one. And I can go into my mod.lua folder or file. And within here, you'll see the format of how to create the mineral nodes. So it's in a section called spawn list, and you need 3 entries: prefab, position, and orientation. So all you need to do is paste over position and orientation. This was an existing map that you were editing. In this case, I've added new ones, so I'm going to copy 2 entries here, and you can just do source between 1 and 3. Going back to this file, I'm going to get the position and orientation. The second one, I'll get the position and orientation. Now, for some reason, it also logs these other things: position, they'll say 0, -5, 0, and so on. You can ignore those. So it's only the first half of this log that I need for the 2 mineral nodes that I've placed. I now have here. And mineral source 1, 2, and 3 are really indistinguishable. They're just different visuals. So it doesn't matter which one you do. I just kind of mix it up. I have 1, 2s, and 3s within my list. So in this way, you can use Aladdin's Lamp mod to place the mineral nodes manually, ensure they're in the right position. They'll always be at the right elevation. And that way you can save yourself quite a bit of trouble. So now I go out of the game and start a new game. I can disable all, so I only have the map itself. I don't need Aladdin's Lamp anymore. And I can test to make sure that those mineral nodes appear where I put them. So here they are, the 2 that I just placed. And I've also placed previously other mineral nodes throughout the map. You can also see in this test run that I now have lots more starting positions because of the manual placement of berries and stone that I did earlier. It's not perfect, but it gives the player a lot more choice. You want to make sure that every major land mass or every major area that's flat enough and has the right resources has a few starting positions. So I think this is great because this one in particular I like. It's in the middle of the map, on a high prominence, and then you can spread the city throughout the nearby area. So I've got lots of mineral nodes kind of scattered over. There's 2 different land masses in this map. So I've also made sure that in my village entry and exit points that I have entry and exit points in both land masses, as they are completely divided by this water, the fjord. So you need to make sure that you have multiple entries and exits in any separate land masses. If you don't, what can happen is the player could start on one landmass and the immigrants could be coming from another one, and the immigrants will never arrive until the player builds a bridge, which may not be possible at the beginning of the game. It's very important to pay attention to those entry points. One way that you can test the entry points is by using Aladdin's Lamp. Pick yourself a starting point on one of the land masses. And within Aladdin's Lamp, you have this wheel, which triggers a wave of immigrants. So by clicking that, putting up speed 3, I should see some immigrants start to appear from the side of the map. Here they come. So that's a way that you can test your entry and exit points. It doesn't fully test it because the traders and envoys also use entries and exits, and they will use a different point than the immigrants. So make sure, as I mentioned, that you have 5 or 6 entry and exit points on each landmass to ensure that you always get traders and envoys. It's very difficult to test that because you have to build up to the point where you can get trade and envoys, which you could do. You could build a village to test this map, and I will test it by playing it. But just be careful. That's one of the major bugs that a lot of maps have, is that traders can't access the village center, or immigrants can't access the village center. And using Aladdin's Lamp mod, you can avoid that, and you can also avoid the other major pitfall, which is having mineral nodes that are inaccessible. So I'm largely happy with the map. I have fiddled a lot with the resource placement. I've changed some of the tree distribution. I've reduced the frequency or increased the frequency of trees and tried to create more clearings inside the trees so that you don't get these huge blocks of forest. which are more realistic in some ways, but more difficult to play with. I find it's often easier to have these little clearings which give an obvious inroad or buildings, and then you can clear more trees as you build, rather than having huge monolithic forests. There's a place for monolithic forests, but in my games I typically tend to prefer this sort of scattered landscape. A couple of final things that we need to do. We're going to create some screenshots for the preview image that we need when we post this to the game. And in order to do some screenshots, I'm going to use the bird's eye camera mod. I'm just going to add that to a game. I'm going to pick an inobtrusive spot for my village center. And I'm going to place the bird's eye camera here. It'll disappear once it's placed. I'm going to turn off territory boundaries. And in my book, I'm going to go to workplaces. Now I have access to the camera from the book. So I can click different heights and start to get some above ground views of my map. So if I turn off the user interface with Control U, I start to see the map from a bird's eye perspective. That's a little annoying because when you click off of the camera, you get this kind of movement problem. We'll just try different settings until you can see most of the map. And F12 to take a screenshot. I'm also going to do some oblique camera shots so I can see map in 3D. For a screenshot. So I can see up here, I get a much better sense of what's going on with the map. I've got this first landmass, which is sort of a peninsula, and then I have the surrounding area over here. And this area is one piece. You can see that there's access points all along here, so immigrants coming from any part of this landmass will be able to access the entire thing. And I think this map will be quite fun because it'll give lots of opportunities for bridges, which are always nice. It'll give opportunities for the terrain tool, the terrain mod, which is used to make little ports along the way. It'll make it challenging to get fish because you're going to have to be able to access the shore, so all these cliff sides are inaccessible, but then you have these little ramps that go down to the water. That'll make it interesting to try to place fish. And of course, you have a few cliffs along the way which will impede your progress as you're building and sort of force you to make interesting choices as regards where you place your village. I think the obvious places to put a village initially would be in this middle landmass here, either right here along the end of the peninsula or inland where you have more trees and maybe more flat land up top. So I'm quite pleased. When I create maps, I try to set out to create something a little unique. And there are maps with rivers, but a lot of them are flatter, which is easier. But I like a challenge. I like to have something that's a little different. I think this will give me a new challenge. The only thing I would say about this map is it does lack major hills. Although if I go in to the map itself, there's obviously plenty of hills. They're just not huge hills. But I think it'll still look nice. If you had a city up here, you'd be able to see it from a long ways away. And I think this terrain is quite realistic. This is based on the Grand Canyon in the US. So it's real terrain. It's not just a flat fantasy made up terrain. So I like that aspect as well. It's going to be quite challenging to build a city in here, but it will really force you to think about the placement of where you're putting things and to have maybe the roads going through the smaller bits and then the buildings up on these little ridges. And it will also force you perhaps to appreciate the flat land that you do have. It's almost like playing on an island or islands, like my Kirkwall map, which is small islands. Only the islands are these plateaus, and then you have little flatter bits elsewhere. Not to everyone's taste. A lot of people complain that there aren't enough flat areas in Foundation. I think that really comes from playing other games where everything is flat. A lot of city builder games basically have nothing but flat terrain and often are built in grids, so people are used to not having to contend with topography. I find that super boring myself. If you spend any time building things in the real world, you'll recognize that unless you live in Kansas or somewhere similar, flat ground is a rarity. Now to give my preview image, which is going to be a shot of the map here, I'm going to take a few screenshots down low so that the player will get a sense of what the land looks like. Steam screenshots are a little bit hard to find. If you look here, I'm in my program files Steam user data, and to be honest, I don't really understand this system of why the screenshots are in here. They may be in a different place for you, but if I go into 760 remote, I've found that this is the path to my screenshots. Look online to see if there's a way for you to easily find these. It was a little challenging for me to find them, but once you found them, you could save them as a favorite, and then you'll always have them. So here are my most recent screenshots, and I'm going to select one of these as the preview image. So we'll just take a look. This one, something that will be representative of the map. I think this one's probably representative because it shows the fjord and it shows a bit of the land. So I'm going to copy, go to paint.net, Control N to create a new, and paste. And what I need here is a preview image which is the right size. So going back to my mod, in the metadata folder, I have a preview image. It needs to be a certain dimension. So you'll see in the details that this is 600 by 200 pixels. So I need to do the same for my new image. So I'm going to take my selection, grab this. I'm going to try to make sure that the aspect is close to 6 by 2. Copy, new, paste, and then change the image size 600 by 200. And if you've done it correctly, this should look correct, or it should look like the original image. I'm going to save that as a JPEG in metadata and replace preview image.jpg. To see this work, I have to exit the game completely. Now when I go into my new game and go to Eidfjord, I will see the preview image. I've also updated the description of the map to ensure that people who look at it can judge whether the map is suitable for what they like to play. The next step of my map making process is to play a game using the new map. Once I've tested it fully, I will publish the map on foundation.mod.io. To do that, you click Add a Mod, and you create the mod, you fill out everything. The only step I need to explain probably is the files step. How it works is you'll go to the mod itself, so here it is. Click into the mod so that you're in the contents. Control A to select everything. Right click, send to compressed folder. Rename the zip file, and that is the file that you'll be uploading. So make sure that you zip the contents of the folder, not the map itself. And every time that you upload a new version of your map, if you are making changes to it, in mod.json file, you need to increment the version number. So each time, if I were to make updates to the map, I would increment that version number. And you'll also be adding that same version number when you upload the file to mod.io. So that's it. I'm going to test the map now, and hopefully everything worked out. But I hope that was useful for you to understand how I make maps. This was kind of the simple process. There is a more complicated process that I go through to create more complex maps, especially maps that I draw myself or where I use other real-world height maps. But that will be for another video. Thanks for watching.